What are you saying, geezers? The Sacred Timeline is the new featured location, showing up in 40% of games. We're going to look at the best decks for this location, but also we're going to talk strategy. First to fill this gets a copy of their opening hand. So quite similar to the Raft. However, instead of a 0 cost 6 drop, you're going to be getting a copy of the first 3 cards that were in your opening hand. So you and your opponent are both going to be racing to finish the Sacred Timeline first. However, it is important to remember that if you fill this up really early on and you don't have a way of putting more stats into that location, then you could just be costing yourself the game. So it's a balancing act between filling it up first while also not just giving up the location very easily. 2 good cards are things like Vision and Nightcrawler, ways of moving cards in and then out. Space Stone off Thanos as well. So you can fill the location up and then move something out and put a big card in there later on. Carnage and other destroy cards is another nice bit of synergy here as well. You can play Carnage as the 4th card into the Sacred Timeline. You'll get the 3 cards in your hand, and then you will have more space to play cards there later on. Having just slots open at locations is very important in Marvel Snap. Some key synergy cards. Quinjet you could consider putting in pretty much every deck. Of course, this is going to make the 3 cards which go into your hand cost 1 less. Devil Dinosaur has some obvious synergy with the fact that you're going to have extra cards in hand. And the Collector is going to be getting 3 extra points. Bit of a shout out to Morbius and Modok as well. Modok being the new Battle Pass card. Of course, 3 extra cards in hand means 6 extra discards, or 6 points of extra discards for Morbius. So that could be pretty exciting. Okay, also worth mentioning Storm. Storm I always like to consider with these featured locations because you can just eliminate the location entirely with her. Of course, Scarlet Witch, Rhino do the same thing, but Storm is my favourite of these location changes. You can even play Storm as the 4th card into the Sacred Timeline, get the 3 cards, and then force your opponent to try and win it quickly. And that's something you could definitely do with this Thanos deck, which is the one I'm most excited to play. Of course, not many people have Thanos, but if you do, this is going to be a banger deck. You can fill the location up very quickly with all of the reality stones. You've already got Quinjet, you've already got Storm, 2 of those key cards I highlighted. Space Stone can move cards out of the Sacred Timeline after already finishing it. You've got Blue Marvel and Kazar to pump extra stats in there as well. This deck should be very powerful indeed. This is my favourite build of Thanos by a large margin. I think it is the strongest Thanos deck in the game. If you don't have M'Baku, you could replace it with something like Infernaut, would be more than fine. But this is the best build by far, in my most humble of opinions. Okay, next up we have Collector Discard. This is a Series 4 version. I do have a Series 3 version to show you in a moment as well. I posted a video on this deck yesterday. It is the best Modok and the best discard deck by a distance, in my opinion. Much better than Hela. Pretty similar in terms of Lockjaw being a focal point. One thing this deck is going to struggle with is actually filling the Sacred Timeline up quickly. But I do think that as the meta develops, people will realize that it's not that important to fill it up really quickly because a lot of decks are going to struggle. But what this deck does well with the Sacred Timeline is that Morbius, the Collector, and Modok. Getting those 3 extra points on Collector is lovely, but then it's going to be 6 extra points on Morbius of discards. And you could even get double Morbius, for example. That does sound very nice indeed. The pull through version of this deck is looking very similar. One thing you might want to consider adding into here is Leech as well. You could remove the Collector without the Helicarrier, but I think with the fact that the location has got Collector synergy, you can keep it in there. Gambit could be replaced by Swordmaster for sure. Also, Leech is a serious consideration instead of Gambit or the Collector. The reason I've removed Leech from this is because 5 energy is clashing a little bit with Modok, of course. Okay, up next, Cerebro 2. One that I thought to add this morning. This is my favourite build of Cerebro 2 using a Hobgoblin. You can also use Iron Man in this slot. There's quite a lot of flexibility. M'Baku, if you really love that card, can come in here as well. Mr. Fantastic. There's so many good options for these Cerebro 2 decks. But the idea is double Cerebro, double Mystique off of the location does sound really spicy. And you have Nightcrawler to fill the location up and then move it out. You also have Storm as well to be the final card that goes in there. Goose, another card that I really do like in Cerebro 2. But of course, with all the Zabus and Silver Surfers going around, I decided not to include it. You could also dabble in removing something like Mr. Sinister with this particular location because you might end up with too many Swarm type cards like Brood and Mr. Sinister, but it seems a little bit ridiculous to be removing those. I think this deck could be absolutely banging, particularly if you can get that Cerebro or Mystique in your opening hand for that extra point power play with an extra Cerebro is going to really take this deck to the next level. Okay, three more to go. Silver Surfer. Silver Surfer, as mentioned at the start, makes a lot of sense because getting double Silver Surfer sounds really good. This is probably my favorite Silver Surfer build. The 2-cost card is pretty flexible. You could also include Quinjet to have that synergy with the location. I decided not to include it just because of Killmonger. A lot of you will be surprised to see Debris and Killmonger in the same deck, but it works really well. You clog your opponent with Debris. You use Polaris as well to put a second rock in that location. You're always playing Killmonger on the final turn, and often you just have more board space than your opponent because you're just playing 3-drops a lot of the time. Also, what you can do with Debris is you can play Brood and then another 3-drop to fill up that location, and then Debris in mid so that you only get 1 rock, whereas your opponent has 2. Scorpion, the 2-cost card of choice, but you could go for Goose as well. Again, Zabu decks just make Goose a little bit awkward, but if it wasn't for Zabu, I'd be playing Goose here. I'm going to show you a Devil Dinosaur deck next. I would say this list is not refined necessarily. I went with Dark Hawk. Any Devil Dinosaur deck of your choice, just the one that you are most comfortable with, is going to do the job. I just wanted to show you this one with Dark Hawk and Zabu. I think it's very, very powerful. Shang-Chi could easily be replaced for Absorbing Man for that double Spider-Man combo as well. Zabu, we're expecting to get nerfed very soon, but of course it hasn't happened yet. Finally, last but not least, a Deadpool deck. This is one that I'm also very excited for. Bast Deadpool is a new combo that I've discovered after unlocking Bast this week. If you don't have it, Bast can easily be replaced by Death, and Death is a card I want to try with this one anyway. The idea of playing Deadpool today with the Sacred Timeline is getting extra Destroy cards in hand can be really impactful. Getting a second Forge could be huge as well. Getting a second Deadpool, not necessarily that impressive, but a second Nova, a second Killmonger, a second Deathlock Venom, all these things could really turbocharge Deadpool. A lot of the time what ends up happening with Deadpool is it's going super well. You have a massive Deadpool and you just need 1 more Destroy card to make it even bigger, but then you just don't have enough in the deck. So this is the one I'd go for. Again, Death, definitely a serious option to consider for this location as well, because if you can get Death in your opening hand and then copy Death and then make Death cost nothing, you're playing down a whole lot of points. I suppose She-Hulk also is something to consider trying out for similar reasons. If you can get a She-Hulk in your opening hand and fill up the Sacred Timeline, double She-Hulk on turn 6 then becomes an option. So these are my favorite decks for the Sacred Timeline. Top tip again is to try and fill it up quickly, but don't overdo it. If you've got those ways of moving things in, moving things out, I should say, some Destroy, Synergy, that's going to help you out a whole bunch. I would say don't go too all in on this location. I think that while it is definitely one that you could build a whole deck around, it's only showing up 40% of the time, and there are a lot of ways that you can get trapped and baited into filling up the Sacred Timeline and still losing the game. My top deck for the day is definitely Thanos. If you have Modok as well, I think Modok looks really hot. If you don't have any of these, and you don't even have Silver Surfer, I'd say the deck to explore is a bit of Cerebro too. Of course, you can play other Cerebro decks as well. That's the really fun thing about Cerebro. There's a whole bunch of other versions that you can go for, but Cerebro 2 is the best one. But don't be afraid to try some Cerebro 3, Cerebro, whatever you fancy, really. Thanks so much for watching the video. Give it a like if you enjoyed it. I actually recorded this yesterday, uploaded it, and there was no sound. So hopefully the mic has been working. Nice one. See you soon.